Okay, I was working on this quilt yesterday. I shut down for the night. This morning I've rolled the quilt and I'm in edge to edge repeat patterns. Now I'm going to do a relocate. I read many times about different ones leaving their computer running for days or at least overnight because they've started a quilt and they didn't finish it, but they're afraid to shut down because they're afraid that they can't get the project back up and running. If you'll use repeat patterns for your edge-to-edge quilting, you won't have that problem. All I'm going to do is right click, select relocate, shift all to one point. I'm going to click on this point. I have my machine sitting there. I'm going to click yes. If I zoom way in, you'll be able to see that now the crosshair is sitting right at the tip of this point in this pattern. There's where the needle is located now. I drew a boundary. Now I'm going to adjust my pattern to fit within this boundary. This is one of those quilts that the lady's already sewn on these prairie point things. So I need to be careful how I quilt out on the edge on both sides. Now on the right edge of the quilt, notice that if I pull this pattern out, I have the entire row selected. Pull this out a little bit to fill this edge. Notice that this piece is going to stitch off into those prairie points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this pattern to get rid of this last little piece right here. I have only this last repeat selected. I'm going to right click, divide pattern. I'm going to click on that node and I'm going to delete that part of the pattern. Now it will not stitch off the edge. The left and right side of the pattern have been adjusted to fit within the boundary along these prairie points. So now I'm ready to stitch this row. I will use relocate again. I've quilted this row and I'm ready to relocate. Notice that it indicates the needle is way up here, but the needle is sitting right there. All I have to do is right click and select relocate, shift all to one point. I zoom in, click on that point, click yes, and notice that the patterns are all shifted. Everything is realigned. Now I'll have to draw a boundary around this row and I'll have to adjust these edges so that they fit within the boundary of the edge of the quilt. I've made the boundary and I've adjusted the pattern to fit the way I want to, and again I'm going to remove this little part of this pattern so that it doesn't stitch off into those prairie points. Now I'm ready to quilt. This is how easy it is to get relocated in repeat patterns edge to edge. You don't have to worry about shutting down your machine. You can shut it down anytime you want to need to shut down, come back, restart. It can be the next day or the next week or however long. Just do a relocate your project and you're good to go. I have 3 rows of patterns left to quilt. Now I'm going to measure the quilt top that's remaining to see how much of the quilt top I have left to quilt. I measured the remaining quilt top that I have not quilted. It measures 39 inches. I've selected the last 3 rows and Notice here it says that I have 37.67 inches of quilt. I'm going to use this bottom wedge and I'm going to increase that pattern to it reads approximately 39. There's 38.34. I'll make it a little bit larger and I'll readjust this as I quilt and roll. I'm going to leave it at that right now. I have rolled the quilt again and relocated to one point. Then I drew a box around the last two rows. I also measured, I placed the needle at the top edge of this next row to be quilted and measured to the end of the quilt. I have 29 inches or 26 inches, and when I drew the box it says I have 25.93 inches of pattern left, so I'm going to leave it set at that, and I'll make my final adjustment over the last row. Okay, I'm on my last row. I've used Relocate, Shift Alt at one point. I've drawn a boundary around this last area of the quilt right at the bottom. Now I'm going to adjust my pattern to fit. The pattern is all adjusted to quilt this last row. I'm ready to quilt. I hope that some of the things I've shown you in this video will be helpful to you.